Would $5,000 convince you to have a baby? That's the bet that the Trump White House is making as part of its plans to nudge up the US fertility rate, which currently sits at 1.63 births per woman, well below replacement. And they're not alone. Governments across the developed world are rolling out tax breaks, child benefits, and in some cases, state sponsored dating apps, all in the hopes of jumpstarting your biological enthusiasm. But why? Hi, I'm Jay, and I have a degree in economic policy from the London School of Economics, and today we're unpacking the global fertility crisis, what it is, why it matters, and how we got here in the first place. Birth rates have been falling for decades in rich and poor countries alike, and as usual, governments are just now responding to something they probably should have planned for 40 years ago. But before we get into the solutions, we need to understand the problem. So, to start, we're going back, and not just a few years, but a few centuries to see how this all began. For most of human history, humanity lived at a kind of demographic stalemate. Without access to contraception, people had lots of children, and I mean lots. But thanks to disease, poor sanitation, and a complete absence of germ theory, life was, to put it politely, fragile. It was a biological lottery. Have as many kids as possible in the hopes that one or two survive. Children were an economic asset, free from labor and ideally a DIY retirement plan. So population growth remained stagnant, and not just because people weren't, let's say, getting busy, but because mortality had the final word. By the mid 1800s in Europe, fertility rates hovered around 5 births per woman, and life expectancy sat at a bleak 35 years. That sounds medieval, but it does improve once you strip out childhood mortality. If you made it past the toddler stage, you had a decent shot at seeing your own grandchildren. And then came the Industrial Revolution, and with that, a demographic plot twist. We usually associate this era with steam engines and coal, but it also quietly ushered in a revolution in public health. Soap started showing up. Germ theory replaced the idea that diseases floated on the breeze, and vaccinations started rolling out. People started living longer because it turns out basic hygiene is pretty effective. As mortality rates dropped and life expectancy rose, the economic logic of having children shifted. Raising 5 or 6 kids was no longer a survival strategy. It was starting to look like a very expensive hobby. Fewer children were needed to ensure that some made it to adulthood. And in the newly urbanized, cramped cities, more kids just meant more mouths to feed and fewer square feet of personal space. And at the same time, family planning began to spread, and not just conceptually, but practically as well. People started actively choosing when and whether to have children at all. The arrival of reliable contraception methods, such as the birth control pill, changed everything. And this wasn't just a public health win, it was a social and economic milestone. The pill gave women unprecedented control over their reproductive lives. It contributed to higher female labor force participation, delayed marriage, and shifted the timeline of family formation. Fertility, once dictated by biology and social expectation, was increasingly shaped by choice and opportunity cost. And with that choice came a steep decline in fertility rates. In the 1850s, the average American woman had around 6 children, but by the 1950s, this had dropped to around 2. And 2 decades later, the US fertility rate had dropped below the replacement rate of 2.1, the level of births needed to sustain a population. Today, the US average sits at 1.63, and in many countries is significantly lower and falling. And here's the thing, our economic system really doesn't like that. Modern economies are built on the assumption of population growth. More workers, more consumers, more demand. It's the compound interest of capitalism. Everything from GDP forecasts to housing markets depends on each generation just being a bit larger than the last. But when populations stop growing, the gears start grinding. As populations age and shrink, consumption falls, and not just because there are fewer people, but because older populations consume less. They buy fewer homes, fewer cars, and fewer things, and they don't drive retail, tourism, or tech adoption the way that younger generations do. Economies built on demand side momentum start to falter when there's no one left to demand anything. And then there's the dependency ratio, the number of dependents, children or retirees, relative to the working age population. Japan is among one of the worst in the world. As of 2023, more than a third of the country's population is 60 and older, and it's only getting worse. It's like trying to run a company where all your employees retire and no one is applying for the job. This strains public finances. Governments must spend more on pensions and healthcare, but collect less in taxes from a shrinking working age base. It's a slow fiscal squeeze. More obligations, fewer contributions, and a rising debt unless something gives. Productivity also takes a hit. Fewer workers means fewer brains, fewer hands, and fewer people. Economies try to compensate with automation, innovation, immigration, the holy trinity of demographic control, but let's be honest, those levers aren't guaranteed. Innovation is messy and uneven, and you can't just order a productivity boost on Amazon Prime. Automation works for some sectors, but not for elder care or kindergarten teachers. And immigration, while it can be incredibly valuable, it doesn't solve long term fertility decline, especially when immigrants' fertility rates quickly converge to national norms. Eventually, countries run out of ways to kick the can down the road. And when you can't add more workers and you've already squeezed every drop of efficiency out of the ones you already have, productivity stalls. Not just relatively, but absolutely as well. Fewer people producing less. That's a tough sell for any economy. And socially, you get intergenerational tension. Young people are expected to support an ever growing number of retirees while also saving for their own increasingly uncertain futures. And the elderly are expecting entitlements that they've paid into all their lives. No one is wrong, but everyone is frustrated. It's like a macroeconomic Thanksgiving dinner. Governments are trying to respond by raising the retirement ages, expanding childcare subsidies, and offering cash for babies. But demographics doesn't change on a dime. Policy today won't bear fruit or children for decades. And meanwhile, the population clock keeps ticking. So that's where we are today. A population with fewer babies, more birthdays, and an economic model nervously glancing at the population pyramid. The long run challenge isn't just aging, it's that not enough people are being born to balance it out. Without more births, everything from tax systems to the housing market to productivity forecasts all starts to topple over. But this isn't all just doom and demographic gloom. So stick around. The solutions are up here next.